and that leads us down to Brian Huberty, who is a retired remote sensing scientist with none other than the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, has worked inside the federal firewall for a long time, and he's going to give us an overview on how to think about getting some assets out of the federal system. So with that, Brian, I'm
Thanks,
ready to
Steve.
run some slides for you.
I'll just say next, and I would say it was too long in the federal system. No, thanks, Steve, as well as Randy for that great presentation. I actually brought up some ideas we'll have to talk about. This is not a complete list. This is just off the top of my head of some of the major ones to think about. And this first one is actually particularly robust, but you have to have a federal connection to have access to this. If you are a state agency that's federally funded, you can get access. The way you do this is go down to that lower bottom corner, left corner, where it says get registered, and it'll have a contractor part, but that's actually where you put in your federal point of contact. And what this is all the commercial satellite imagery, not just Maxar, but other National Reconnaissance Office contractors are actually bringing their data sets, which also include radar, into this massive, they call it EVWHS system that is on the Amazon cloud. And you can literally look, anywhere in the state for the most part, and look at changes over time. And with the daily coverage now with Planet, for example, and they also have a contract with them, is you can get that situational awareness at least on a daily basis as we speak. And it's really a question not of getting imagery anymore, it's really, can you handle it? And again, we're not going to get into the details of this, but it's probably one of your more unique assets, but it can be very useful, let's say, even in the winter. So with that, go ahead and hit the next slide there, Steve. The most common international or national resource is run out of USGS. It's called the International Charter. And what that is the USGS works with their counterparts across the globe, like with Canada, with their radar satellites, commercial vendors, and they will actually donate imagery or allow access for major disasters like earthquakes, floods, you name it. It's something you should just put on your bookmarks. And one of the key people actually lives in Minnesota. He works remotely from the USGS Aeros Data Center. I can't even think about what his name is off the top of my head. So anyways, these resources are relatively local. Brenda Jones, who used to run this, has been up to our past meetings, and she came out of Aeros Data Center in Sioux Falls. So something to think about if you're swinging by the Aeros Data Center. Feel free to stop in for the 10-cent tour, but you can probably track somebody down who's connected to this program, and they can probably feed you some more information. Next slide. Yeah, Ryan Longhenry, I forgot, I put his contact information down. I pulled this off the internet. He's in charge of that program right now. So there's your point of contact. Next slide.
Hey, Brian.
Yep, go ahead.
Let them know where this center is.
Sioux Falls, South Dakota, Aeros, ERS, Aeros Data Center. It's out in the cornfields north of Sioux Falls, about 20 miles. They also serve up this website called the Hazards Data Distribution System. And you can get on those lists, and they'll literally feed you every day, maybe even more frequently, specific disasters of who's got what sources of imagery and where. Next slide. Then FEMA has improved their process. They have their point of contact, you'll see here in a sec, his name's Glenn Russell. And again, you can just Google FEMA remote sensing and you'll get to this ArcGIS website. But they have a list of sources, and it's sort of a good background of, who do you call? And for example, and I'm going to not pick on Sean, but Sean Mangan's with the Department of Pipeline Safety. And one of our worst case scenarios is what happens if a oil pipeline blows a gasket going down to Duluth Superior. what you're going to call to measure or to map those flows of oil going out into Lake Superior. It's sort of important. And one thing I learned from the Gulf oil spill, it's a lot more complex because some of those resources are not readily available. And in that particular case, British Petroleum hired two major sources when that oil spill happened out in the Gulf. One was a iceberg mapping aircraft out of it was Iceland and Canada. Actually, they wore out one of the airplanes because that could map the oil flow out in the Gulf in terms of area very effectively. And then for oil thickness, they hired Dave Four, who runs airborne data systems out of Redwood Falls, because he could map in near real time the multispectral and get it processed rapidly. Again, this is 2010, and that was delivered to those cleanup crews. So again, resources can be sort of unique in terms of how do you assess where those disasters are and where they're moving, because in the Gulf of Mexico, when you have winds, that oil's blowing around, and that's what could happen in Lake Superior, for example, especially in the winter, which would make it even worse. So again, hit the next slide, and I think I have Glenn Russell's point of contact information. He's former Coast Guard, and actually during the Gulf oil spill, I asked Glenn, why didn't the Coast Guard fly this? Because their aircraft actually got mothballed or actually decommissioned 2 years prior to that accident. And they used to have these side-looking radars, which could do this very well. All right, next slide. Who do I have next? Oh yeah, our FEMA Region 5 point of contact. Allison Slatt says, in case you're interested, send me an email. We have a 1 p.m. call with Sean and Chad Hansen's actually on this call as well from the HSEM to sort of go over what's available. And Melissa, and I've never met Melissa before, but she's our Region 5 point of contact out of the Chicago office. She handles Minnesota, but she gets to work with her counterpart, for example, let's say with the Red River flood, which we all experienced a number of years ago. And that's the Denver region. Again, she has access to resources and as well as the forms to request assistance. Next slide. Oh, there's Major Tom. I beat you to the punch there, Tom. I think you also just chatted your other email in the chat. You might want to make a note of that. This is what I pulled off my contact information for you. So now you can track Tom down anywhere in case you need a drone or a flight in one of the Cessna 172s or 182s. Also, don't discount the fact that, and Tom was bringing this up, is the reason for getting an MOU with the Civil Air Patrol is if you need to hop in your airplane, maybe you're better qualified at assessing a damage in your area, in your backyard, in your county. Because if you're one of the ground pounders, like out in like Todd County, you know the backyards, you know everything, you know every person out there likely, and you're probably better, you have better knowledge in your brain about where to go and where to look for things. So don't discount the human remote sensing aspects of this. Okay, next slide. Thanks, Tom. What's up next? Who do I have? Oh yes, the state costs associated with remote sensing imagery requests. This is a chart that is sort of getting updated. The stuff in yellow actually was sort of updated by Glenn Russell. The National Technical Means, NTM, that's actually the classified stuff. That is stuff you probably don't want to dive into unless you really, really have to. That's that first row going across there, but that is a resource that FEMA has ready access to it. And these are the classified satellites. But the commercial optical stuff that's coming on board now, that's the second row. And this is the new license framework. It's called EOCL. That's that first column, third row, or second row. And this is the new licensing agreement that they have, not just with those that are listed there, but they have another another dozen or so contracts that I was just listening to yesterday and today with some of these newer companies that are popping up. Looking at thermal, which is actually needed for fires. We really do not have good thermal resources in this region. There's just 2 airplanes, I believe, still out with Boise and the Forest Service out in Boise, Idaho. And I believe that when the Greenwood Lake fire up in Lake County, to this day, I don't think they had any imagery flown of the real-time fire aspect. And speaking as a forest firefighter many years ago, you really don't want to be looking at, yeah, we have a fire in this county kind of map. You really want to know where that front is and where it's moving depending on weather conditions. So again, this is actually, I think, a weakness in the incident command system. They really need to have a remote sensing component actually built and proactively being delivered even before it's declared a disaster, because you need to have these resources for not just the responders, but for the general public on how to see and avoid where something might be impacting their house or their area. So just double checking, the stuff in yellow is what's been added, and it's a formal request, and this is where Melissa will come into play here, and we'll probably get that stuff ironed out and this thing fixed and hopefully get up on the website here in the near future, especially with the potential of flooding. But luckily we've had a slow melt going on, so yeah, we'll probably still see flooding, but hopefully nothing as dire as what it was maybe a week or 2 ago, but we'll see.
So Brian, I went through and accepted Glenn's edits on here just so there's awareness to that, and I did publish it to our quick resources page, and as Brian has indicated, we'll update it again after talking to Melissa on Monday. But I think if I could insert the takeaway from all of this, the CAP presentation, this imagery presentation, is the thought that there are capabilities out there that you need to think about if you would really need them. And if you do, understand there's a cost associated with them. We've tried to present this grid as a way of helping people understand that if there's overlapping need, for instance, FEMA wants the same imagery that you want, then lo and behold, you'll get the imagery for free. Or as in the case with Civil Air Patrol, if you can align it with a training mission, there's an opportunity for free imagery also. So it's about making sure your request comes in as you would request a bulldozer. It goes into HSEM and from there sorted out, but this is awareness that the capabilities are out there. Is that fair?
That's fair, with the addition that there probably needs to be and this is later on, is state resources need to be improved for being able to respond. Like request imagery, buy imagery, whatever the source is, and that might take some legislation, some vision, and with capital, but it's too late for this year. It's something we just have to work on in the future.
Understood. Thank you, Brian. Appreciate it.